Okay. Okay. I just need to get to. All right, so two people cannot share their screen at the same time. I'll do it from Apple Music. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Foote. I'm the Secretary of the Metropolitan Black Bars Association, the Sports and Entertainment section. We're waiting for more guests to arrive and attendees, so we will be starting shortly. So if you have any questions that you might be interested in when it comes to sports law and what's been going on with the Black Lives Matter movement and activism, please drop your questions. We'd love to get them asked later on during the program. So again, we're going to be starting very shortly. We are thankful that everyone is here, so stay tuned.
we shouldn't try. We had a good thing going lately. Might not have always been a fairy tale, but you know.
Get the recording going. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Foote, and I am the Secretary of the Metropolitan Black Bars Association for the Sports and Entertainment section. On behalf of our co-chairs, Lauren Johnson and Chris Ellis, I want to welcome you all to tonight's panel. So the Metropolitan Black Bar Association is an affiliate of the National Bar Association, the nation's largest and oldest organization of African-American lawyers and judges. Founded in 1984, the MBBA provides a voice for Black legal professionals and the communities it serves. Tonight's program, Sports Law and Society, is extremely timely, and we hope to bring awareness to how social grassroots movements have affected sports and entertainment law. The panel discussion will focus on the relevance of sports law to the Black Lives Matter movement and the issues that plague professional athletes in terms of contracts. I really hope that you all will enjoy tonight's event, and I want to turn it over to one of our co-chairs, Lauren Johnson.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Today, I would like to introduce our distinguished panelists who have had a variety of experiences in the sports and entertainment industry. We are very happy to have them here. Today, we have Jill Pilgrim, Esquire, who will be moderating our panel. Jill Pilgrim has a distinguished legal career, which includes decades of experience in the business, sports, and corporate environments. She continues to work as an attorney, strategic business consultant, an international consultant, arbitrator, entrepreneur, and as a law professor at Columbia University School of Law. Jill is also a published legal author and advisor. Ms. Pilgrim is the principal owner of Pilgrim & Associates Arbitration Law and Mediation, LLC, as well as the acting executive director and general counsel of the Track and Field Athletics Association, Incorporated. Ms. Pilgrim serves as a panel member for the Commercial, Consumer, and Olympic Sports Dispute Panels for the American Arbitration Association. She has built a national reputation as a prominent business, sports, and ADR lawyer. She previously served as the chairwoman of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association Sports and Entertainment Law Section. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jill. Thank you for agreeing to moderate this panel. We also have Mason P. Ashe, Esquire, who will be a panelist with us this evening. Mason Ashe is the founder and CEO of AsheSports and Entertainment Consulting Incorporated. He has 31 years of experience as a sports and entertainment attorney, talent manager, industry advisor, and sports agent. He has served as the lead contract negotiator, legal advisor, brand strategist, and for professional athletes associated with the NBA, WNBA, NFL, FIBA, and esports, pro and college coaches, social media content creators and influencers, financial advisors, entertainers, on-air personalities, celebrity chefs, authors, film producers, investors in delivery mechanisms designed to commercialize talent, and producers of TV and web-based reality shows. For 15 years in academia, Professor Ashe has designed curricula and lectured weekly on sports law and global sports business management for the benefit of wealth management executives and students at the high school, undergraduate, graduate, and law school levels. He currently serves on the adjunct faculty at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, Georgetown University, and Howard University School of Law. Ashe previously practiced law at both national and regional law firms. Before forming ASCC in 2004, he was co-founder, COO, and general counsel of Strickland & Ashe Management, and vice president in the team sports division at International Management Group. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Hamilton College and a Juris Doctorate degree from SUNY Buffalo. He was awarded the Sports Lawyer of the Year award from the National Bar Association and was listed on 101 most influential minorities in sports by Sports Illustrated in 2003 and 2004. He is a former board member of BISLA and currently serves on the board of the University at Buffalo's Foundation Incorporated, Hamilton College Board of Trustees, and is the chairman of the Washington Jazz Arts Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor Ashe. Thank you so much. I really appreciate having you here today. Next, we have Alycia Powell, who has extensive practical expertise as a business and legal consultant. She has provided legal and business services to professional athletes, entrepreneurs, nonprofit organizations, and small businesses for over a decade. She is a social entrepreneur in the fields of sports and entertainment and not-for-profit management. In 2017, Ms. Powell co-founded Champions for Philanthropy, a consulting agency that assists professional athletes, entertainers, and influencers in developing their charitable brands. As the co-founder and CEO, Ms. Powell helps athletes establish their not-for-profit foundations, manage existing foundations, design charitable initiatives and programs, as well as create other charitable vehicles for giving back. CFP works with both current and former retired athletes from professional sports leagues such as the NBA and the NFL. CFP also sustains a blog entitled The Sport of Philanthropy, which functions to provide a spotlight regarding the positive work being done by athletes, teams, and leagues. Thank you for joining us, Alycia. Shameeka Quallo, Esquire, Associate Counsel for the Chicago Cubs, is a strategic, business-oriented counsel with transactional and compliance experience and a track record of success and leadership. Shameeka is a trusted legal and business advisor that promotes guidance on broad ranges of business and marketing initiatives, legal issues, and implementing risk management strategies. Shameeka has experience negotiating and drafting a variety of agreements, including sponsorship, vendor, service provider, consulting, and licensing agreements, manages litigation, and ensures compliance with data privacy laws. In addition to her legal role, Shameeka also serves as the chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. Prior to joining the Cubs, Shameeka was the Associate General Counsel and Senior Director of Multicultural Affairs for the International Speedway Corporation, ISC, which is the leading promoter of motorsports-themed entertainment activities in the United States. In addition to her legal role, she led ISC's diversity and inclusion strategy and related programs and partnered with NASCAR and other sports leagues to garner and leverage best practices. Prior to joining ISC, Shameeka was associate counsel for the Ladies Professional Golf Association, the longest-running women's professional sports organization in the world. Prior to becoming an attorney, Shameeka was an audit manager for 10 years with the National Futures Association, where she safeguarded market integrity by coordinating and performing risk-based financial and compliance examinations of firms that traded futures, options, and foreign currency. She analyzed internal control systems and assisted member firms with compliance for regulatory responsibilities. Shameeka is passionate about disenfranchised communities and has extensive public service background. She is a change agent who believes in giving back and is actively involved in not-for-profit organizations. She currently serves as the board of USA's weightlifting and on council of the James R. Jordan Boys and Girls Club. Shameeka chaired the board of junior achievement of Alycia County, where she fostered financial literacy, work readiness, and entrepreneurship in students in the K through 12 grades. She participated in Street Law, a program which is designed to advise at-risk youth in Newark about the legal matters that impact their everyday lives. She is also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Lastly, Shameeka guides law students and young attorneys looking to break into the sports law industry. Shameeka is a graduate of Rutgers University School of Law and St. John's University, where she earned a full athletic scholarship. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Shameeka. Thank you. And finally, we have Darrel Young. Darrel Young is a former American football fullback. Darrel was born and raised in Amityville, New York, where he played high school football at Amityville Memorial High School. He then went on to play college football at Villanova University. He is an NFL veteran where he played for the Washington Redskins, Chicago Bears, and Carolina Panthers. He served as team captain for 3 consecutive years and was the recipient of the Byron Whizzer Award for Community MVP. He also won the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award in 2014. Mr. Young is now currently the Director of Engagement and Player Relations for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has maintained his commitment to community outreach programs and as an NFL player and as a corporate professional. He has volunteered for the Greater Washington, D.C. Big Brothers and Big Sisters organization. Darrel was also an NFL USO Tour participant and has substantial community involvement in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. He holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Communication and Media Studies from Villanova University. Mr. Young is scheduled to receive a Master of Science in Sports Industry Management from Georgetown University. He has earned several professional licenses and certificates in areas which range from business administration and management to leadership and advocacy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Darrel.
Thank you.
Okay, so now that we have introduced all of our panelists, we are going to discuss CLE credits, which will be given at the end of the panel. We will be able to give CLE credits. Chris, if you want to talk a little bit about the CLE credits.
Sorry. Yes, so we'll issue a code out through about the middle of the event or towards the end, and you will need that to collect your CLE credits.
Thank you. So our code word for the CLE credits, Chris, I think is going to be BLM 2021. So we will mention that code several times throughout the duration of this program, and that should be the code that will allow you to receive CLE credit for participating or for attending this panel tonight. Okay, so at this point we are now going to get started with the panel. And I'm going to turn it over to Jill Pilgrim, who will be moderating our discussion.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much, Ashley, Lauren, and Chris, for your amazing work in pulling together these very knowledgeable expert sports people with connections to the legal and business of sports communities to discuss an issue that of course is very near and dear to our hearts and our skin color, which is social justice in the context of our sports executive experience. I'm going to ask everybody who is not speaking to mute your connection, to mute your microphone so that we don't get any background noise. And we're going to get going by just exploring exactly what are we talking about when we talk about Black Lives Matter. Are we talking about an organization, a movement, a concept? Alycia, can you take us into this discussion with some of your perspective on what does it mean to you when Black Lives Matter is raised?
Yeah, so according to their website, Black Lives Matter Global Network, which was formed in 2013, has turned into a chapter-based member-led organization whose mission is to build local power and to intervene when violence is inflicted on Black communities by the state and vigilantes. I think the concept of Black Lives Matter has morphed more into a slogan, a catchphrase, and even a call to action. It's become a rallying cry for justice and to humanize Black lives during a time where we were feeling particularly vulnerable from watching so much Black trauma unfold. Black trauma in America is not new by any means, obviously, but since at least 2012, which was around the time where Black Lives Matter was formed, the actual organization, we've watched it so vividly with the 24 hours news cycle, social media, and actual recordings and seeing deaths unfold before us. So I think those who are not able to get behind the organization Black Lives Matter for whatever reasons, based off of conversations that I've had with others, sometimes it might be the founders, the creed, the values, the principles, things of that nature. Even if they're not able to get behind the actual organization, they're able to rationalize and accept the phrase Black Lives Matter from a theoretical and fundamental standpoint. That's just my opinion in terms of the difference between the actual movement and the organization.
Yeah, so let's take that into the executive suite. And Shameeka, if when you are advising executives and in your organization, if they were to ask you, what is Black Lives Matter and how do you educate executives who are not of color about what Black Lives Matter means in their context?
That's a great question, Jill. And one that I think that I am fortunate in being in the role that I am in now. And I think all of my fellow panelists, as well as the attendees, are fortunate to be in places and spaces where we can, in fact, educate organizations on the current social justice issues, or not even just the current issues, but things of the past. There's oftentimes been discussion regarding whether we as the Black employees or the Black executives of the organization, if we should be in fact tasked with educating the organization on the Black Lives Matter movement or issues. And for me, that answer is an absolute yes. We are in the spaces that we are for a reason. And if we did not use our voices, we would be doing a disservice, not only to ourselves, but also to the culture. And so when I am in spaces, I use that to amplify the voices of what's going on. Not only just what's going on, but how is it affecting our workforce? What does it mean? How are your employees affected? How are they coming to work dealing with trauma, anger, and fear? And, as an employer, are you able to understand their disengagement while they are balancing work and life? So I certainly use my position to educate the other executives in the company about what's going on, what the organization can in fact do to acknowledge it, to acknowledge its effects on employees, and also just what resources they can tap into to educate themselves about the history of it, what podcasts they could listen to, what books they should be reading, how they could start conversations with their staff about what's going on. And so I think that ultimately, like every individual, whether you are Black or not, in an organization should be accountable for just the things that are going on in society. But me, as being someone who experiences it firsthand, I certainly make sure that I am educating my team on what to expect, and in turn, what I expect from leadership.
That's great, Shameeka. And you may have had a heavy lift as you've been in golf and racing. Now you're in baseball, and each of those have a different level of participation of people of color as athletes and or as fans and of the sport. So Darrel, your sport, your athletes in your sport, yourself, having been an athlete, a football player, you have been talking the talk for a long time and being very patient, waiting for the executive suite of the NFL league to come along with you. And then they finally did. Take us through that journey for you as a player. You've been talking about these issues for a long time.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. That's a great question. It was tough. When Kaepernick took a knee, that was towards the back end of my NFL experience. And I had a coach tell us, if we take a knee, we will cut you. And we're telling you, we're here to win games. This is a business. So, you pick and choose your battles wisely, but this is one that we actually had a guy who took a knee and they released him the next day, and that's not being spoken about. So it's been tough, especially being Black in the business, being in the world. You already have, stereotypes and stigmas about you as a, Black professional athlete. But, some of the things that went on, we didn't feel like we had a voice. Well, fast forward, things happened with George Floyd, NFL players have found their voices. And if we didn't realize anything last year, we understand that it starts with the players on the field. When they spoke up, that's when the commissioner stood up and said, we condemn racism. That hasn't happened. We haven't been known to be progressive, but the players' voice is about the player ultimately. So whatever the players want, that's what the players will get. And, now we're seeing a different stance in terms of how much money the NFL has pledged, but over the next 10 years, which is $250 million. But that's still not the answer, because we have to be boots on the ground, because we have to go in and be role models to, some of the Black children that, even from my community, I go back and let's talk financial education. I don't want to call it literacy, because literacy to me, draws a picture. It means that I'm dumb, and I'm not dumb. It's just more so, what am I exposed to? What am I aware of? And, again, I'm proud of the guys in the field. I just accepted a position with the Pittsburgh Steelers this past week, and I'm in the locker room now, and a lot of guys are talking about, what are we going to do? How do we continue to move the needle and hold the owners and everyone else accountable? We don't want to get in the way in business. We understand we need to win games, but also we have a social responsibility to give back. So let's go back into these communities and build and provide, reading books and libraries and all these things that we think are kind of boring in Black communities when we grow up, but it's actually some good things coming out of it. So we're actually building out a plan now with our social justice committee of how we're going to attack the year. And, so again, players, it was tough. It was rough. It was hard knowing that I couldn't represent what I wanted to, but I think that's where the movement came in. You talk about Black Lives Matter was awareness. The movement was about the action. And that's how I would sum it up.
Yes, and it must have felt really good when some of the other athletes from other sports backed you all up. And I think once there was critical mass, the on television killing of a man notwithstanding, the support of other athletes in basketball, tennis, Naomi Osaka, others also really helped. Mason, so given what Darrel just said, that he was at one point told, he and his fellow players, that if you take a knee, you'll be gone the next day. You're an agent, you're negotiating for players, you're recruiting players, and you have to guide and advise them on how to manage their professional career, presumably without getting cut because they took a knee. How do you manage that?
Well, it is definitely, first of all, thank you for including me in this conversation. It's a pleasure to be here. For a lot of years, I have helped players kind of come into this new found platform that they find themselves on. And not every one of them have been historians. Not every one of them have had a clear understanding of what went on before they got to the league, whatever that league would be. Whether it's rugby, whether it's football, basketball, baseball. And so I think there's an obligation of the agent to first and foremost help the player get educated about the game and the history of the game and the integration of the game. It almost sounds like an old history lesson, but it wasn't that long ago. And when we talk about integration, we also talk about certain positions, like the quarterback in football. It wasn't long ago where that wasn't a position that was available to Black players. And so educating the player about really what the world that they're stepping into, part of that, I believe, is engaging the players, the young players, with the veteran players and the retired players. That doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes the only time a young player might meet a veteran player is when somebody is recruiting a player and asking him to talk to a previous client or an existing client, and then the young player often says, man, he's old school. That's an OG. He can't tell me anything, but you're missing the point of being able to learn from somebody who was in that role that you're about to go into, played the position that you're playing, has dealt with the community that they had to live in that city. Imagine getting drafted to Green Bay, Wisconsin. Not many Black people have been to Green Bay, and there's not many Black people in Green Bay when you get there. So, it helps to be able to talk to somebody who's been there prior. And how did you raise a family there? Where did you live? How did you express your culture? And how did you stand up for your rights? And did you have any particular landmines that you had to be careful about when you got there? Those kind of things aren't often given to the player, depending on who their representative is. The agent is not often looking like me, and so, or being sensitive to the issues like I am. And so when I connect a player with, I had a quarterback Back in the day, they introduced them to Shaq Harris, who was one of the first Black quarterbacks who could lay down the whole history of the Black quarterback position and pass the torch to this young man. That doesn't always happen. So a lot of times you find our athletes confronting, the media and being confronted with questions. They don't have the depth of knowledge to be able to answer the question because nobody took the time to really educate them. And so that's where I think the agent's role is, not just negotiating contracts and making sure they get paid on time, but also being able to comprehensively understand what is going on in the big picture around them and what they can do with that platform and how to leverage it.
And picking up from that, Alycia, how do you, when you are working with players who are looking to get involved with charitable initiatives in the community, how do you advise them, or do you advise them on how they can incorporate their sensitivity and caring about social justice issues in the Black community as well as their charitable work? And do you have the opportunity to have them incorporate the concept of Black Lives Matter?
Yes, so even if we are not directly advising athletes to incorporate social justice activism into their charitable platform by using those exact words, we're constantly encouraging our athletes to focus on issues that are social justice issues, but may not always be viewed as such. Education, mentorship, helping to eradicate food insecurity, financial education instead of financial literacy, as you pointed out earlier, housing assistance and healthcare. Those are common examples that we work with our athletes on that are social justice issues, but are not always framed like that. One thing that's interesting, we had a client, a former MLB client, who works on an environmentally focused nonprofit. And that is a social justice issue that is not normally phrased that way. When waste is dumped in neighborhoods, they're usually Black neighborhoods, which lead to health issues down the road. When factories are pumping out pollution, causing asthma and other health issues, it's disproportionately affecting Black communities. So even if we are not saying you need to incorporate social justice activism into your charitable platform, a lot of the issues and causes that we are working with them on are social justice issues, but they just may not be framed as such. But we do have a client whose whole platform, whose whole nonprofit foundation that he started is around social justice. So, obviously for us caring about social justice, it was great being able to work and build a foundation from the ground up where that was the focus. But even for the others, we are always incorporating things that affect our community.
So I don't know if you all had this experience. I'm guessing some of you did. After the horrific murder of George Floyd, every major corporation wanted to or did come out with a statement in support of Black Lives Mattering at a time when historically they had been silent or said very little. I know in my own experience, I was a part of a legal organization that they had a quick committee meeting and they wanted to come out with a statement, and my vote was no. What's the point of a statement, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, where have you been, right? So Darrel, the NFL players had laid the groundwork for a long time with the NFL. And even before George Floyd's murder, you all had gotten the NFL to invest in charitable causes around the Black community. Did you do anything more enhanced after the NFL league got religion and the commissioner came out with, oh, I get it now, essentially?
No, it's a good question. I think, a lot of things that we look back when we tried to measure success, we said, we spoke about how much money we donated. We spoke about how many charitable organizations that we've impacted or connected with, but we didn't necessarily hone in on what the impact was. So if we take 100 kids, how many of them after we've done a charity event have been able to raise their GPAs, who have been able to have better Wi-Fi in the home because of what we were doing? We didn't measure that. Well, now we took an initiative to do that. And I know I'm no longer there, but I'm still a part of it because of the larger entity with the NFL. So with the initiatives, you know, we started to get intentional about the approach as opposed to just checking the box with a lot of it. And, you know, you've seen us go into the Black communities and donating to, you know, Black-owned businesses, launching programs or pilot programs with HBCUs around, you know, one of the things we talked about with HR was they said they didn't know where to get talent. And we said, okay, well, we're going to create a pipeline for you. How do you know? But whatever, we don't want to talk about it. We want to be solution-based. Here's a list of 300 candidates that should be interviewed for the JRP program. That's historically been something that the NFL has done. So we took an intentional approach. You can come up with excuses, but now it's on you. So you said you didn't know, now it's on you. We're presenting you with the framework and we're doing it again. We selected 32 students out of those students who were not selected out of that JRP program, and then physically place them into different departments around the building so they can gain that business exposure. So as opposed to just being on a football operations side where they mostly see us, we wanted to be on the business side. How can I create a pipeline and localize what the Rooney Rule was in the local buildings to say, you know what, we have another Shameeka Quallo who's more qualified than maybe someone at Princeton, but they're just not getting that exposure. And here's what it looked like. And here's the pipeline of how they get to where they want to get to with it. So, you know, we still have a lot of issues to address. You know, diversity doesn't mean inclusion. And that's one of the things that we learned about. And as we continue, when I look at leadership, not much has changed yet, but, you know, it takes a while. So we'll see what the NFL does in terms of backing the employees and moving forward from here.
So it sounds like you got in there and got real specific and really hands-on, and all of a sudden you had the support that you didn't have in doing that in the past. Shameeka, you're in a huge institution. How do you carefully, respectfully, you know, what was the conversation like, if you're able to share, about whether or not to come out with a statement and what that would really mean?
Yeah, Jill, I think you raised a good point in your initial example of the organization that you were dealing with, and they said they wanted to come out with a statement, and you said absolutely not. What I found, especially over the past year, is that you have to be true to yourself as an organization. And in a world where everyone was just flying out statements, our approach was, we don't need to be the first to respond, nor do we necessarily need to put out a public statement, more so than we need action. And we need to be thoughtful, we need to be intentional, and we need to be true to who we are. So what in fact does that look like? Taking a step back, kind of to the baseball world, and you pointed out earlier, like, I've worked in organizations that have traditionally stayed out of divisive issues around race and social activism. Baseball is nowhere near football and NBA as it relates to taking progressive approaches. Very known for its traditionalism and its aversion to risk is what baseball is known for. If you look at the makeup of our players, about 8% of our players are Black, 30%, around 30% are Latino and are from outside of the United States, and the rest are white. And so when you look at the makeup of our players on the field, when you look at the makeup of our fan base is a traditionally older fan base. Most are pretty conservative as it relates to politics. And so, like, you have to, in fact, take a look at your own home before you sail out a statement that doesn't feel real, doesn't feel genuine, and is not something that you are really committed to. And then on the other side, you have to look at your ownership as well. So it has to be something that's genuine to your ownership, your leadership, and the direction in which your organization really wants to be known for as it relates to this space. And so we took all of that into consideration as we started to have these discussions. And our approach was, let's not be the first to respond or to put out a statement, but let's make sure that we are mindful of our constituents. So our employee base, how does it feel if we don't say anything, or much less if we don't do anything? You know, what is the league doing? So what is Major League Baseball? Should we take our cues from MLB? What does the Ricketts family think? because the Ricketts family owns the Chicago Cubs. And so kind of we took all of that into deliberation as we just thought about our action plan. And I think the very quick answer was we have to say something. Yeah, we may be a little slower to the race. No, activism is not new. No, social injustice is not new, but we've been a little slower to the plate as it relates to speaking out against it. But one of the things that I am super proud of is the fact that we have taken a stand, and we are now taking the approach of, you have to crawl before you walk, before you run, as it relates to being vocal. And the league is as well. As many people probably noticed, Major League Baseball recently came out and publicly moved the location of the 2021 All-Star Game from Atlanta as a result of Atlanta's potential voting law, which could disenfranchise Black voters. And so the league itself is now saying, hey, we cannot be quiet, we cannot be silent about it. And that's definitely something that we did here at the Cubs. In addition to putting out a statement, both externally and internally, we have committed to enhancing our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We now have a DEI council for which I serve as chair. We have had voter registration drives. We had associate rallies or employee rallies. We've committed financially to organizations that are really moving the needle. We've had educational sessions and brought in experts to really speak to our staff about what's going on. So to Darrel's point, a lot of it is not just lip service. And I think that people now are not satisfied with lip service. It's more than just putting out a statement. It is, what are the actions, intentional actions that we are going to take and that we are going to commit, whether it be financial resources and or bodies, to really help move the needle and raise awareness about these injustices, and committing to essentially using our platform to help move the needle.
So Mason, would the advice that you would have given a player, say you have a player, they're going to go to the majors, they've gone through all the physical, psychological testing so that maybe they have that last meeting with the team business leadership, right? Would what you have told them to have said prior to the killing of George Floyd versus after the killing of George Floyd been different? Because I'm going to make the assumption in my hypothetical that because of the heightened awareness of the executives at the team about social justice issues, that they might now ask your client a question about that. How would you advise your client perhaps differently than you would have before there was this heightened awareness in the executive suite?
Well, that's a complicated question, but if you want the honest answer, my client has to make the team first. And so I'm not going to tell my client to come in, beat his chest or her chest about too many things except making the team first, and depending on what league it is, particularly the NFL and the NBA, they don't really want to hear that you have a backup plan to be a social activist or a banker or business owner. They want to know, are you going to help us win games? And then when you're interviewing before the draft, all they want to know is what you've done for the whole life to get to this point to play on their team and win games, period. Now, anything else is a distraction when you are trying to get the job. Now, and so if they ask my client, well, what do you think about social justice? Of course, you can tell an honest answer. You can say, yes, I've always been committed to that in my community and in college. And you can say that, but you can say, well, when I come there, I'm going to go around the locker room and I'm going to, create all sorts of havoc in your locker room because you guys have been too quiet. That's not a good answer when you're interviewing for a job. I'm just being real.
I love the honesty. I always love it when we keep it real. We got to keep it real. So, okay, let's talk about one of my favorite topics, Olympic sports. Having been a track and field athlete, Darrel, one of your players, thought he would dabble this weekend in track and field. I'm not even going to talk about that. He was good, though. I mean, he was fast, right? But
he was 35 pounds heavier than everyone. It was good. It was good.
Okay, so we have a very interesting scenario, and I'm very curious how those of you on the panel would advise an Olympic athlete. We have the U.S. Olympic team, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, with their heightened BLM sensitivity, and now they're all about John Carlos and Tommy Smith and honoring them. They're saying we are not going to penalize an athlete who protests in the context of the Olympic Games. We have the International Olympic Committee saying not so fast. We don't want you to protest, particularly on the podium. I think what they're going to do at the Olympics, and I'm assuming, of course, we're going to have an Olympics. That's a whole other conversation. But they don't want athletes exhibiting any kind of political or social justice protest on the podium. And typically what the IOC would do is create a separate sort of forum for that. You know, notwithstanding that, there are going to be athletes who are going to politically protest on the podium, right? We know that that's going to happen. Alycia, how would you advise an athlete that you're working with who you're thinking, this is great, they're on the Olympic team, they're going to win a medal, we're going to have all these great marketing and opportunities to work with them after? What are you going to tell them about political protests, social justice protests at the Olympics?
You know, that's such an interesting question. And you really want the athlete to do what feels right for them. But to Mason's point, at this point, they made the team, they won, they're on the podium, but they have to think about their future afterwards, marketing opportunities that may go away, or, you know, being banned by the IOC. So they have to really weigh in terms of if they want to use that particular platform for their social activism, or do they want to afterwards be able to express their political thoughts in a different venue, in a different forum that is not going to jeopardize their future career or future opportunities.
So I'm really shocked to hear you say that, because given the heightened awareness around social justice and Black Lives Matter, both the organization and the movement, I would assume that the business environment is more accepting of those issues. Ash, how would you weigh in on that?
So, you know, I think we all have to figure out a way in that we can express ourselves, you know, and I don't know that if they do give you an opportunity to express your support for a particular cause at the games, but not on the podium or not on the track, are you really selling out if you don't wait until the opportunity comes to express yourself? If you don't express yourself at all and you don't stand for anything, is a whole different point. But if they are making time for athletes because of the heightened sensitivity that's going on now and awareness, and there's always been human rights violations going on at every game, and not just in the United States. So that's not new. And some athletes have all, you know, decided they're going to have one sock down and one up, you know, and that was going to be their passive resistance kind of thing. You know, people still do that anyway. But, you know, some people streak, take their clothes off and run across the field or something. I mean, you have to decide what it is that you are willing to do to make your statement. You know, I don't think you're selling out if you go to the organized session that they have for athletes to go and express themselves and not lose some type of marketing endorsement that will help you finance your family's future and education of your children. And then when you come out of the games, use this platform to do all sorts of things to make your message known to the world. So you have to decide kind of where and pick and choose your battles. You can't win every battle. So, you know, and that's the kind of thing we get caught up on sometimes, is that you got to figure out strategically, what battle do I want to win and fight, and where can I get my message out to the greatest number of people? So, you know, that's something you have to kind of think about, because you can kind of play your cards too fast or too in the wrong place and then limit your platform. So you have to figure out, how do you maximize your platform?
Well, I might push back on that. I'm putting Alycia and Mason in the conservative corner right now because
You don't live on commission.
might it not enhance your platform if you do a protest on the podium? By the way, I know like 100 lawyers around the world that would love to take the case of the Olympic athlete, and they will, because it's going to happen if the Olympics happen, who would love to take the case of an Olympic athlete who does a podium protest.
I would defend that person. I would defend that person. I'm not saying I wouldn't defend that person, because they have a right to do that if they want to. But my point to you is, you know, whether or not I would encourage it, would I plant that in their head to go do it? I'm not so sure I'd do that. You know,
Right.
So I don't know that I'm conservative or not, but I would definitely defend a person's, you know, constitutional right or the right of free choice to be able to do that. You know, there's no question about it. But I think strategy is what we're talking about here, and managing celebrities of the highest level. You know, but there's definitely, you know, there's always lawyers that'll defend any side of an argument, because there's always another argument to be made. And I think that if we consider, you know, the days where they did raise the fist on the podium, I'm glad they did that as well. I'm glad that my cousin played tennis where he did, where some people said, "Now don't go to South Africa," and he did, because he wanted to raise attention to certain things. So you have to make decisions at the time that you're making it based on the circumstances that you're under. It's not all the same. Like what happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and now, it's not the same strategy. You got to look at all the facts and figure out how do you maximize the greatest outcome for getting the message there.
Conservative isn't a negative word in a limited context. I wasn't calling you politically conservative, okay? But let me say this. Let me say this to open up the conversation. So the NFL is going international. Baseball is international, right? And there's, I think baseball is back in the Olympics, but baseball is international. It has international players. So you have the Olympics saying you can't wear Black Lives Matter. They specifically, you know, are banning social protest, like wearing a t-shirt that says Black Lives Matter, or a sneaker that has hashtag BLM on it, or whatever it is, even if it's your official uniform. So Darrel and Shameeka, you have you're in sports that are going global, are global. And, you know, how would you evaluate, I know the NFL isn't in the Olympics, but baseball is. So I'll start with Shameeka. Might a baseball player actually create more notoriety for him or herself, softball, and their home team club, if they did make a social protest? Or how would you look at that?
Yeah, I think that fortunately, sort of like the demographics of our players, I would be shocked if there was a player that decided at the Olympics to use that as the platform to raise awareness to a social justice cause. I would be shocked. Not quite personally, I wouldn't be disappointed. To Mason's point, you know, when athletes were raising fists on the podium, you know, I absolutely love it and stand in solidarity with them. But I think I would be more shocked if it came from a baseball player, and not to say that it wouldn't happen. The one thing that I would say is, I guess the Olympic stage is not the only platform in which you can raise your voice, in which you can bring notice to causes that are important to you, whether they be social justice issues or other issues affecting your community. And so I would maybe look for more of the players to use that smaller stage as the platform. So the Players Alliance is an organization of former and current baseball players, Black players, who has been very vocal within the communities, and in each community in which there is a team that sits in fighting social injustice. I just don't necessarily see the Olympics as being the platform. But on the flip side, and I guess the IOC, their ban on making political statements, this isn't new. Essentially, they're saying that they are going to uphold their existing rule that bans that. I would more so challenge the IOC to identify ways in which athletes can, in fact, amplify their voices about issues that, you know, are affecting them and their communities. I believe they said like there would be more messaging in Olympic Village and inclusive messaging in the opening and closing ceremonies and throughout. I would challenge them to take that a step further so that they are in fact acknowledging and affirming that we hear you, we hear that there are causes that you support, we hear that the times that are going on now are affecting your ability to perform and just your life conditions, and that we see that. So if you're restricting an athlete's ability to protest, you are saying as a compromise, here is our commitment to raising awareness of the issues. So that's what I would like to see.
So Darrel, how did you feel when the international world took up the cause of Black Lives Matters and social justice that you as an NFL player had been touting for, you know, for years? Did you feel that that was appropriate, or did it not matter at all to you?
I was excited because from an NFL standpoint, we don't get that international recognition. Like we've tapped into London, we're trying to tap into China. We have Mexico, but I don't know if they have the resources, you know? So thinking about it from that standpoint, I looked at it as an opportunity to, you know, 75% of the league or whatever that number is over 60 are minority, you know, and they're Black. So how are we supporting the players on the field when something they're passionate about? And from an international perspective, it humanizes players to fans. It gives them an opportunity to grow a different fan base. And we all know that players are into branding, but we can do the branding piece, but now it comes with intentionality. And what is the work that we're going to do behind that? So now that we have this national recognition or this global recognition, like what are we doing to sustain that? And how do we keep that, you know, how do we sustain it over a period of time? So I was excited. I'm still excited. The only thing that I'm mad about is we're not talking about it as much. I asked the NFL before I left out the other day, what's the plan for this year? What are we going to do? Decals were last year. What are we doing to move forward? Like, I love it. It's great. We can do it again, but can we do that? And like, I want a little bit more. How can we take it a step deeper? In the NBA, you've seen them write out on a court, Black Lives Matter. Nothing against all lives matter on the field. It was perfect. But I don't know if the players asked for that. I wasn't in that meeting, so I don't know. I'm not calling them out. I'm not saying anything, but from conversations, it was, is that enough? You know, and my short answer is no. We need to do some more. And what that is, let's hear what the players want.
So let's talk about institutions and policies. Let's look at the NCAA. So the NCAA has recently, I think one of the conferences, as I recall, has recently adopted their version of the Rooney Rule that the NFL has, where they're asking they're asking the conference to make a commitment that when they have openings in the executive suite and with coaches, that they're going to interview coaches of color, right? So let's get a little bit more deeper into sort of, you know, what really are the policies out there in the sports business world that should be looked at, changed. You know, we have all these professional men's sports teams that have, you know, like they're 32 teams. You know, they don't have typically many Black coaches and assistant coaches. Then we see now women are getting into the ranks of the referees, the coaches. So something is happening. There's becoming a lot more awareness and openness, but is it enough? Do you think it's enough, Alycia?
I think it's a push in the right direction. You know, this may be a conservative answer, but change can be slow. But I think there needs to be, it is good that they are putting actual policies in place. But the Rooney Rule, you know, especially this last season, it's in place, but it's not as effective as I think it was hoped to be. So it is, while it's great to have certain policies in place to make sure things are formalized, if it's just being done to check a box so they can say they did the interview, and there's not actual changes and making sure that you're putting people in these positions, then it's just for show. It's just like the equivalent of putting, you know, Black Lives Matter on the court or on the field, but not actually having any meat behind it or any real action or wanting to actually change how things are done. So if it's just business as usual, but it looks good because it's in place, then I don't think it really is effective if they are going to be actually try to push it forward and make sure that they're putting an effort behind it, then I think it would be good.
So Ash, I know you work with young folks back in like the junior high school, and you have on a previous panel, you talked about how you have started to work on initiatives with youth that are not in it, particularly inner city Black and brown youth, that you're not just showing them the playing field, you're taking them into the office and showing them all the different types of jobs and different ways that you can get employed in sports. So are we like putting too much emphasis on the head coach job as opposed to other aspects? There are so many jobs in sports that people of color, women can get. Are we doing a disservice by focusing just on that top job, the head coach or the commissioner, Ash?
I'm not sure that we're doing a disservice. I think you got to keep the pressure on everywhere. And I think there's more pressure that can be played respect to camera people and directors and producers and executives. I always joke that the people who have the best jobs are the corporate sponsors who fly in on their private jets at TV commercials when the players are doing these photo shoots and doing these commercial product and advertisements. The corporate sponsor flies in, makes sure everybody's doing their job, you know, sits smokes a cigar, and then they leave. I said, that's the person paying for the whole thing. So, you know, we got to be in all of these positions, right? We got to be the network executives. We got to be on the corporate sponsorships. We have to be the venue stadium owners. We have to be all of those things. And so when I do my summer program at Georgetown for high school kids, I'm teaching 15 to 17-year-olds to think about they can be an owner. They can be a venue owner and facilitator. You know, they can be the event coordinator for esports tournaments that are broadcast globally. I mean, these 15, 16-year-olds are already in some of these sports like esports, but they're thinking about playing the game. And I'm saying, how about creating a new device? How about creating a new game? You know, and they say, oh, you know, I guess that's true, you know, or creating the music that's played in the background of one of these games, you know, and, you know, so we're really opening their minds to all the different things that are going on. So I wouldn't take a direct pressure away from the head coaching position or the commissioner of a conference, but there's a lot of other positions as well that I think we need to just plant the seed early for our students and student athletes who love playing the game while they're in college or whether they're in high school or in college. And if they don't get to the pros, that's okay. But if they love the game, they can still stay in the game and still be a stakeholder in the industry, you know? So that's what I'm hoping to be able to, well, not hoping, that's what exactly I've been doing for now 15 years. And some of my students are now executives at teams and you know, professionals in the industry. So that's a really, to me, a different kind of social justice push that we're creating so that we're not all bottlenecking at trying to make the team. You know, it's great if you can play, you know, but I think you can also own the team and employ. So I think that's a great message.
Shameeka, baseball has a reputation as having all these great diversity programs that go beyond the field, right? That they vendor programs and different things like that. Those have predated the current awareness of Black Lives Matter. Can you talk about that a little bit and whether you think those have been effective and can be enhanced?
Yeah, Jill, I think just based on sheer numbers alone, I certainly think that our past initiatives can be enhanced. One, I think that organizations have to be intentional about it. And two, and I know this is a word that no one really wants to hear, but accountability, I think, is where a lot of this sort of where the rubber meets the road, right? So similar to the Rooney Rule, MLB actually has a similar rule. It's called the Selig Rule, named after our former commissioner, Bud Selig. And it is very similar to the Rooney Rule in that you have to consider women and minority candidates for certain on-field positions. So general manager, assistant GM, director of scouting. But I think where it falls a little short, and as identified by the fact that the needle has not really moved much as it relates to minority talent on the baseball side, is like, what really does consider mean, right? Are you just looking at a resume and saying, okay, I considered, or is there more meat and substance that you can actually add to that? And the league itself is looking into that and looking at revising and refining the Selig Rule. On the flip side, some of the discussions that we've had here at the Cubs is, do we implement something similar to that on the business side of the organization, right? So in the legal department, in the finance department, in the, accounting, IT, marketing, like, how do we really put some teeth behind making sure that we are committing to diversifying our workforce? In addition to that, like, we have tons of youth programming in underrepresented areas where we, tap into kids and youth in urban communities. How are we introducing them to the sport of baseball? And not only that, what are we doing to help identify that, hey, you too can work here? So here at the Cubs, we have a program called the CASE program, which is a program that really taps into, I think it stands for Career as Sports Executives, and it taps into high school sophomores and juniors who are interested in sport. It takes them through a very extensive program, and it was led by, it was led by Theo Epstein, so our former general manager, right? So they actually had access to executives on the sports side, whether it be data, whether it be scouting, whether it be legal. They receive presentations and essentially kind of walk them through sort of like what it looks like. So not just exposing the youth to opportunities to be on the field, but what does the back of the house look like? How are these organizations running? And so I think that if organizations, especially within the baseball space, are more intentional about it and more committed to it, then we can in fact expose a different demographic and get, and diversify our workforce into these spaces and places where they traditionally have not thought that opportunities existed.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, what has to happen with our younger people, is because we traditionally have not had the parents who go into the sports executive office to take our daughter to work day or every other day where, they can do that, right? So Darrel, you work with players in your position. Notoriously, those who know sports, particularly the NFL, say that the statistics show that the average career is 3 years, right, in the NFL. So I'm assuming, and I know that the NFL, I don't know if everybody listening knows this, but the NFL does have these transition programs to help players focus on after your career, right? Not just thinking about what you're doing now. So as the environment has changed around social justice issues and Black Lives Matter, have you seen any difference in the types of business endeavors that players are looking to get into, or are you counseling them any differently through your NFL programs?
I could not mute. So I wouldn't say counseling any different, because it's always about educating. Why are we doing this? And everything starts with the why. Why are we doing this, and how passionate are you about it? After Kaepernick took a knee, my boss, Arthur McAfee, up at the league office, who's a great man, very knowledgeable, but even just a better person. And really had the idea and said, let's partner with Morehouse. Let's create a program to teach players how to be advocates. So when you do have your voice in the community, you know how to tell that story in a positive way, that it's not going to be conflicting and you're actually supporting what you're trying to do. So if you're, want to support autism, if you want to support whatever it is, we're going to teach you that. But we really focused at Morehouse on the opportunity. We had the King Center there. We did a tour with that. What does it mean to be Black? We did human trafficking. So there was so many different things. And it was a certificate program to say, now that you've completed this, we're going to hold you accountable, as Shameeka said, to what's next. So we started visiting detention centers. We partnered with the Players Coalition. We've done work with RISE. We've done work with I Am a Voter. So all of the players, just about, I want to say over 95% of the league last year actually are registered to vote now because of the initiatives that we were doing. So I think we took an intentional approach to that, but again, still not enough, and there's still a lot of work to be done in that space. But I think we're doing a decent job of meeting the players where they are today. But again, this 2021 class is going to be different than the 2020 class. So how are we educating them and meeting them the way they are? Because last year was virtual, this year is virtual, in person, whatever it may be now. And hopefully we get back to some normalcy, if that looks like that next year.
I'm freestyling a bit here, and then we're going to open it up for some questions from the audience. So this is my freestyle question to you all. I'm going to ask each of the panelists. So you sit here as business people, executives, lawyers in the sports space. What is the one thing that you think, if you could snap your fingers, that you would put into place now, whether it would be instant or something that would be a trajectory for the future, that could change the landscape for people of color in the sports industry in a meaningful way? I'm going to call this my pageant question, right? So this is your Miss America pageant question. Shameeka, you're Miss America first.
No, I was just gonna ask if you could repeat your question. I'm sorry.
No, you don't get up to the podium at the station.
I was gonna ask before you called me. I was like, wait, I missed the question. I just heard about a pageant and I got distracted. I'm sorry.
Alycia, did you hear the question?
I did.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Shameeka.
Okay, so the way that I heard the question, what would I do? What would I like to see done? What would I implement right now? So similar to what Shameeka, a hybrid of what Shameeka was talking about through the CASE program with her team and what Mason is doing at Georgetown. I think starting with Black youth in particular, especially Black women, but Black youth in general, getting them to see that there are so many pathways to go into the sports industry. I think in the Black community, sports is a lot of times seen as a way out, but only on the playing side, not seeing that there is just a plethora of opportunities on the business side, not just with teams and leagues, but with sponsorships, with corporate sponsors and things of that nature. So there are just so many opportunities that would exist. So making sure that programming is in place to get to the community and to get to them younger so that they're prepared and are aware of opportunities and can work towards that as they're going down their career path.
Okay, so Darrel, you work in an environment where I've known many people of color, including your boss, who work at the NFL league office. My sense is that most of the teams have some diversity on their staffs, even if we're not focused on the head coach or assistant coach, right? There seems to be a pretty fair amount of diversity, not as much as we would like, but there's diversity in the NFL. So if you could snap your fingers and have something happen with the leagues and the teams that really move the needle for people of color in the football space, what would that be?
I would like to see more minorities or Black people in leadership positions. So we have one Black president in the NFL, and he was just hired last summer. Amazing dude, amazing guy, Jason Wright, cool, spoke with him a bunch of times, but that's just one. I know we have to start somewhere, but I'm working for a Black head coach now, Mike Tomlin. He's a leader of men. I've never met anyone like him. Troy Vincent and him, I see why they're so close, and Art McAfee, they're all close because they're all leaders in their own way. but their ability to effectively communicate. So just having more Black people in positions of power to make decisions and not just be the voice to come down and say, hey, this is what we're doing, but actually in the room, having a seat at the table and having a voice. That's what I would like to see.
You made a very, very important comment, in the room, right? There are so many times that even though you can see sprinkles of people, a little pepper here, a little brown there, but who's in the room when decisions are being made? That's really critical. So Shameeka, the question is, if you could snap your finger in the environment in which you work as a professional in the sports industry, if you could just make it happen, whether it would be something instant or something that would start now and come to fruition in the future, what would you like to see change, or how would you like to see something change that would impact in a very positive way people of color in your world of sports?
Thank you, Jill, for repeating the question. I absolutely love Darrel and Alicia's answers, but I do think having more people of color in leadership positions helps to move the needle. One, from a standpoint of having people in the room, but also seeing a path in which you can aspire to. I think that is critical. The one thing that I would identify, and I see in my world every day, I deal with all of our sponsorship contracts. Money is what really moves the needle. If I could snap my finger, I would say that every dollar that comes in from a sponsor, 30 cents of that dollar, so 30% of all contract value, of all contracts or all sponsorship dollars, has to be dedicated or put aside toward XYZ cause. And each year the organization will determine what that cause is, but the cause has to be for the furtherance or advancement or support of Black initiatives, whether it be on the supply diversity side, whether it be partnering with organizations to get them to do construction here who otherwise may not have the ability to, whether it be with the Rainbow Push, the Push Coalition, whether it be, Juneteenth observances, but really tying in sponsors to an organization's initiatives and having them commit to something meaningful on the diversity, equity, inclusion side that helps to move the needle for employees, players, and just the race as a whole, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, but as the MBA person, the money, yeah, that's that you're tied, you're targeting those dollars and percentages, but that's so true. Money really is the key often to everything. And even when, as Mason talks about these initiatives he does with youth, I've worked in, volunteered in many youth programs. I remember when I was working with the National Junior Tennis League, Arthur Ashe's founded organization in the Midwest in Indianapolis. One of the things we take for granted, being Shameeka and I, and big city folks who can jump on the subway or jump on the bus, problems with kids in the suburbs or in areas where the bus service isn't reliable and there is no subway, they can't get to their youth sports. They need someone to take them, right? If the parents are working or they're working at the time, the lower income folks working at the times that the kids are out of school and need to be ferried there, it just doesn't work. So, so money really can help everything. So Mason, what is your answer to the pageant question?
So my answer takes me back to 1997 when I was at IMG and everybody was like, you got a good job, brother. You got a good job. And I said, yeah. But when I left IMG in 97 and 40 players followed me, and Bill Strickland and I created the largest Black-owned sports agency in the country that was owned by two Black people not related. And people tripped that it was possible. They tripped that the athletes would follow two Black guys, owners. And so I thought this was going to be like a domino, this is just going to happen. It's going to be 5, 10 Strickland and Ashes, right? 2021, I don't see him. So if I could snap my finger, I would change the mentality of our people to work together, have a joint bank account like a regular partnership. There's Black people that have companies that share office space, but they have separate bank accounts because they don't trust each other, right? They may collaborate and recruit players, but they don't have the same entity because they don't know how to, I got to be president. I can't be vice president, right? You know, we don't know how to cooperate with each other and collectively do things and pool our monies, period. We can own teams. We can own stadiums. We can own everything that we want to. We can have competitive businesses in every category, but people who have money don't trust the other people that have money that look like them. If I could snap my finger, I'd change that.
That is so cool, because that is something that I have thought about, particularly in the law firm space. You have a lot of solo attorneys of color, including myself. I have my own practice. But when you try, you see other ethnicities and cultures having law firms and putting them together.
Joe,
And
I've been on these calls. I've been on those calls, like not recently, but I mean 10, 15 years ago. I initiated some of these calls.
Right.
We'd have 10 people on the call from East Coast and West Coast. We couldn't get through the call without somebody saying, well, so-and-so's not on my level.
So it's unfortunate that Braeden isn't here today. He wasn't able to make it, but I think he would break this down from the perspective of systemic racism. And we all have to recognize that as a culture, people of color, whether brown or Black, have been subject to negative education throughout generations, which is intended to create the scenario, Mason, that you're talking about, where others don't trust us to be advocates for them, to be their business representatives, and we don't trust each other. And it's going to take a real psychological reworking over time to deconstruct the impact of systemic racism, because systemic racism impacts people of color, not just people who are not of color, right?
If I may add just really quickly, in 1988 or 1989, my last year of law school was at the National Black Law Student Association National Convention. And actually, no, it was my second year, 88. And I remember, it might've been 87 now I'm thinking about it, I was in Houston. And I stood up and I presented the Buy Freedom Movement initiative that was created by Tony Brown's Journal, who used to have a TV show sponsored by Pepsi, one of the longest running Black talk shows that was on television. And he created, this is before the internet, so he had like a magazine that we call the Buy Freedom magazine, right? And he listed a directory of all the Black-owned businesses in the country. And he was trying to get people to, you know, utilize and patronize this magazine, this list. Wherever you were in the country, they were gonna have a Buy Freedom green dollar sign in the window. Just like you see the A, B, and C for the health department, you see a green dollar sign, that means that was a Buy Freedom, predominantly owned Black company. And let's do that. And I'm at the mic, and somebody got up at the mic and said, from another Black law student chapter, you know, if we try to use Black businesses, they're gonna be late, the product's gonna be bad. I said, you're in law school to be a lawyer, you want somebody to hire you as a lawyer, but you down in other Black professionals? How you gonna survive? How could you even get up to the mic and talk like that? That was amazing. I just said, wow.
Yeah, so we have to start with recognizing our own Black excellence, right?
That's right.
I mean, we all know very bright, accomplished people of color, like everybody on this screen right now, right? And what you're saying, Mason, reminds me of when I was young and naive and just graduated from law school, and I thought I could take the MBBA agent certification course, which I did. And back in those days, you just took the course and you got certified as an agent, right? You didn't even have to have a client, or, you know, that was way, way back when. And I remember a friend of mine who knew an ex-NBA player who brought me to talk to him about the possibility of a Black woman, educated, Ivy League, being an agent for players, particularly Black players. And this is what this Black player from the 70s said to me. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because the white agents are going to tell the Black players not to go with you as an agent because you don't have the connections that they as white agents have with the owners to make the best deals for them. So Mason, I'm assuming that you have dealt with that throughout your agent career.
No doubt. And when you have a great player who's a lottery pick or a first rounder, guess what? They go in the lottery. They go in the first round. Bill Strickland had 3 #1 pick overalls, right? Purvis Ellison, 87, Chris Webber, 93. Forget who the other one was. He did back to back to back. And so people were like, wow, they picked a Black agent? Wait, what do you mean they picked a Black agent? They thought if you had a Black agent, the team might pick over you. They wouldn't draft you because they're going to look for the white. I said, who told you this stuff? So Bill kept shattering this whole idea over and over again. So no, but players like, they are gullible for that sort of thing. If you got a female agent or you got a Black agent, you know, you're not going to get drafted as high. It's ridiculous. If you train and you interview well and you can help a team win, we over and over again, Black agents are showing that that does not impact your status in the draft. But that used to be what people used to say. That's no longer even a valid myth at all. I don't even hear that anymore.
Well, I don't know if it was Forbes or SI, but there was recently an article about how the expectation was that by 2021, there would be more Black agents of sports people, but there aren't. So Darrel, how would you address this issue? You have the opportunity to speak to other players. I don't know if I should we call you out? And did you actually have a Black agent?
Don't ask him that, come on.
No, you can ask. My first agent was Black, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't hear from him until he was recruiting someone else. I never met him in person. So maybe because I wasn't a player, it could have been me, but he was good to me, but he didn't go the extra mile. So my Caucasian agent went the extra mile. He did everything that I needed to do before I even asked him. He knew what was going on in the locker room. And maybe because of the access that he had, I don't know. But the reason I didn't go with a Black agent is because I'd never seen anyone that looked like that in the space. So everything that I seen on TV, everything that was experienced with my peers in the locker room all had white agents. That's all I knew. That was the only ones that came out and traveled to see us play. And when, you know, I don't know if, like, again, because of the access, maybe the lack of connections at the collegiate level, I don't know what it was, but yeah, that was the reason why, because I didn't know where to start with it. And Jerry Maguire was my example, again, a depiction of TV. So, you know, I never seen that. And to be honest with you, to be frank, in my community, a lot of people were stealing from each other. We weren't elevating each other as Black people. So it wasn't a lack of trust, but maybe it is. Maybe it was trauma from things that I experienced of, you know, not assisting each other being Black. We're always looking to get the upper hand and then almost forgetting about where we came from with it, and then not bringing the person with you, versus the Caucasians always elevate. So you see sons, you see grandkids, you see them all throughout the pipeline of why they get to the GM roles, why they get that. I never seen that. So that was my experience with it. It wasn't that I was against it, but then my financial advisor, another one. I never seen financial advisors. I hired a white guy because he was there. He was consistent. He was around me. He explained things to me versus the Black guy. You need to go invest in this. Can you tell me why? I just need to know. I don't know anything about this. I don't speak geek. I don't know what Excel. I don't know any of that. I can't do a pivot table. I don't do that stuff. But you know, as you get older and learn, you know, you get, it's a trusting, and it came down to trust in the space because of the access that they had.
Well, let me just say that there are good and there are bad, both Black and white. You're going to find Black folks who are going to be proactive and going to tell you the things based on whatever access or training or experience. And you're going to find some white ones that won't do it. So that comment, it goes both ways. It's just that you nobody can blame you for choosing who you encountered. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go with somebody that you had a gut feeling is going to take care of your business. But that's not a race issue. That's something that you just happen to encounter. You know, when I grew up in New York City, whenever there was 10 Black dudes standing near each other, somebody was going to fight. That was just what happened. I couldn't believe it until I moved down south to North Carolina that I saw all these black people around each other not fighting. I was like, how is that, right? It's a different culture. HBCUs, you learn how to be around each other. They don't have to fight. I was like, I never went to a concert in New York when I was growing up without somebody fighting or robbing or stealing something. I was like, okay, but when you go down south, it's different. I was like, it's just your exposure based on whatever, right? And so I didn't go to HBCU undergrad, but my wife did, and I just was amazed at the difference in experiences that they had. So you grow up with these different perceptions that, you see more than 10 folks around you, you start grabbing your wallet like, okay, come on, who what's up? Nobody try to take that from you, but that's what you grew up around. That's what you think, but certainly I moved to North Carolina from New York early in my career and started building my practice down there because everybody had a black doctor, black dentist, black accountant, right? Black banker. It was normal. Purvis Ellison said he picked Bill Strickland in 1987 because he had all those black professionals working for him already. It wasn't even a thought from Savannah, Georgia. That wasn't even a thought. But he changed the whole game when he picked Bill being the #1 pick overall for the Washington Bullets. It changed the whole landscape of our industry, but he wasn't trying to do that. He just picked somebody he felt most comfortable with because all his life he had black professionals around him. Just the opposite of what you said,
So
Right.
what we're talking about here is creating opportunities for competent professionals, for future competent professionals, these junior high school kids, to learn that they can be in these positions. And we all know, I know dozens and dozens and dozens of people of color who are smart, accomplished, honest, and of course, we all know some folks, regardless of color, who are slackers and just don't do what they need to do. So what we need to do, and what we are always doing, I know as professionals, is promoting the excellence of Black professionals so that they can be moved up into positions. We are never talking about putting a slacker just because they happen to be somebody's son or daughter in a position. We're always, as people of color, as we all know in our communities and from our families, we have to be twice as good, right, to be considered on level. Shameeka, you were unmuted for a minute. It seemed like you had a comment that you wanted to make.
Yeah, I did. And I think that for me personally, this is kind of just what I do in every day, but I do think that it is important when we are in spaces that we are actually lifting as we climb, right? So identifying the next person who you could just open the door for. I think that as Black people, we are a little hard. Like we say, no, I'm not gonna recommend someone for a position because I don't want my name to be associated with them if they don't do well. Or if we are in a position to hire someone, we say, well, what would it look like if all of my hires are Black people? Caucasians don't think about that. Like, what if my next person that I hire is Caucasian? I don't think that they even think that, and it's on their radar. But to Darrel's point of him not seeing people in those spaces and knowing that there are Black financial advisors, I think is critical. Or him saying, you know, I had a Black agent, but I never really heard from him. I think it's important that where we have the ability to open a door for someone else, or even to educate individuals about opportunities in these spaces, that we are totally obligated to do so. I met Mason at the Beasler conference. It was my very first conference. And from our very first conversation, Mason was nothing but welcoming and really served or offered to serve as a mentor to me. Jill, the same way. She used to work at the Ladies Professional Golf Association. And when I found out that not only my immediate GC was a Black woman, but the GC before her was a Black woman, I was like, I got to meet this Black woman in the Ladies Professional Golf Association. And so, you know, you make those connections, you reach out, and what you find is that people are more willing than not to help bring you along, to help you navigate the pitfalls, or to say, here's what I did and did not do. And so I really think that it is important for all of us kind of on the call, not just the panelists, but also the attendees, to figure out, like, what is your way in which you can tap into the people behind you, whether it just be a conversation, or whether it be, hey, here was my path, here's, you know, where I think you would excel in. And so just so that we start to open open up the door and make it more expansive for people that look like us, so that someone can't say, hey, I didn't know that this opportunity presented itself. I didn't know there were Black people in this space. It's no, I see it, and now I know that I can do it and or, you know, be excellent through it. So I just think that it's imperative on all of us to kind of be that person that we didn't see, and also to just kind of lift as we climb.
And as we start to close things out, I want to just address the fact that it's been alluded to, but in Mason's comments, but you know, every Black person's journey is different. So what Mason was describing about Black men together fighting, I came out of law school in New York City in the early 90s at a time when the Black professionals in New York City were very cohesive. There were many Black-owned restaurants. We were intentional about going to B. Smith's, right? We were intentional about going to the spots that were owned by Black people. And I had Black doctors, and I had a Black financial advisor, and I look for that. So you can be very intentional about that. But I think what Darrel's comment shows is, one, he had different exposures. We all have different exposures. So let's work on, and we've all said it and talked about it, exposing other younger people behind us to different experience so they can see professional Black people doing well and doing good. And to that vein, I had spoken to Lauren about how I think it's a travesty that the Metropolitan Black Bar Association and other Black bar associations are not focusing on making sure that more Black attorneys are representing athletes, right? We shouldn't just be sitting back and just saying, oh, well, that's the way it is. You know, we've got one of the things that I have committed my career to doing is getting legal services to athletes who don't have money, who are coming up as junior high school and high school kids, and they get suspended, or there's something that happens, and even in college, they might need someone to give them advice about something. And there are different parameters for each one of those things. But we've got to find a way as Black bar associations to bring young athletes of color into a space where they can interact with us so that they can see that there are actually competent Black attorneys that they can hire. Because you know what? Athletes don't just need attorneys as agents. They need a real estate attorney. They need a trust estates attorney. They need a corporate commercial attorney. They need someone to negotiate a contract that has nothing to do with their sports or for their family members. They need attorneys look at Prince's estate and Michael Jackson's estate. They're hiring tax attorneys, trust attorneys. There's a lot of money at stake. So we as a bar association, Lauren, this is my first step in the call to action in terms of the bar association. We need to focus on making sure the Met Black Bar is really good about going into the community and doing clinics and things like that. But as the sports and entertainment section, I think we need to figure out a way how to make this happen more for our discipline within the legal profession. And I want to say thank you to the panelists. Any last thoughts before I turn it back over to Lauren?
I saw a question somebody say about being a CPA and other types of positions. MBA, CPA, whatever it is that you're good at, I think you should hone it, and you should make yourself available to professional athletes and entertainers, because there are plenty who do and would like to be represented by someone that they can relate to. A lot of times they go with non-Black representatives because they say, they just didn't have the option, and they didn't even like the person. They didn't even trust that person, but they just went with them anyway because other people on the team might have gone with that person, but they were open to the idea of meeting somebody that approaches them professionally, who has all the certifications, has the training and experience. So yes, I think being a CPA or whatever your strength is, do that well and make yourself available to, I think, but you got to go to the Beasley conference. You got to go to these Metro Black Bar shops. You got to go to the places where people congregate who are the decision makers for the athletes and entertainers. That's how you get put on, quote unquote, as we say, right? You get put on by being at the right place so you can meet the gatekeepers. You know, you sending an email or a direct message through your IG and all that is not going to get an athlete to hire you. You're going to have to go somewhere in the daylight and be seen by their advisors and their gatekeepers. And then you get put on, period. That's it.
I want to just say something about that, but because we don't have to wait until then, because a lot of the best athletes come out of our communities, right? So I became a sports lawyer because my friends were athletes and they needed legal help, right? So we touch these people before they become famous, right? So we need to be exposing them a bit. Alycia, you were going to jump in here.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, there are things, I am a JD, but I am not a licensed attorney. So there are also other things that you can do in the sports industry with a law degree where you're representing athletes or working with athletes in different capacities. So I just want to make sure that point is clear to those who may be wondering, you know, if they want to transition out of law or recent graduates. There's definitely a way to go back to the sports industry. When I was in law school, when I heard that, you know, you will never be hired as an agent because you're a woman and because you're Black. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I heard that from Black people. I heard that from white people, you know, so it was made very clear. That was 10 years ago, made very clear that, you know, that wasn't going to happen. You're seeing a lot more Black agents and, you know, higher ranking athletes taking on these Black agents, as well as more female agents. So the tide is definitely turning, but you don't have to be limited with your law degree to go in just the route of being an attorney or being an agent. There are just a lot of needs. Athletes have a lot of needs where having someone who is smart and capable and can take their law degree and use it would be very beneficial for them.
Okay, so I think are there any last questions from the attendees? Otherwise, I will turn it back over to Ashley and Lauren and just ask the panelists and the attendees. We've made a very important call to action that we really need to make sure that our communities know of the intelligent, competent, skilled attorneys that are available to them, as well as other types of business professionals, and expose them, and also expose younger people to us so that they know that they can do this too. As Amanda Gorman, you know, so wonderfully spoke at the inauguration, and was a beautiful representation of everything every young child could be. There is so much opportunity there. And I give it back to Ashley or Lauren. I'm not sure who's.
Yeah, so I'm going to close this out. So on behalf of the MBBA Sports and Entertainment section, Jill, we first want to thank you for moderating such a great panel. Looking at the comments, so many attendees had loved the discussion. They thought it was flowing, and we want to thank also the panelists for providing your insights, just giving us the inside scoops on the questions that we've always wanted to know on the outsiders looking in about what you all thought and think about what's going on. And it was just such a timely discussion for everything that's been going on in this world and the role that athletes and the organizations have been taking to moving the ball forward and moving that needle forward. We didn't have any questions, but like I said, just great discussion. If you would like to learn more about the Metropolitan Black Bar Association or to join the organization or our section, you can go to mbbanyc.org. There is an upcoming gala, and this organization and this section is really going to put on and push more programming just for younger attorneys or just those in the industry, just to move the ball forward, as Jill has saying. Again, the code, if you are wanting to get CLE credit for New York, we are pending, is going to be BLM 2020. You will receive an email from the organization on next steps in order to get your the credit once we receive it. Again, thank you for all the attendees, the panelists, and Jill. We hope you have a great evening, and we would love to be able to keep this discussion going forward.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job, everybody.